kids are demons. I'm greatly resentful. The stump was the best idea ever.
That was good.
Now, because kids have to have an enriching childhood, we're exiled to this dumb creek. So, should we go into Jade's love of cherubims?
Cherubs.
Or should we...
Seems like the most appropriate thing.
Yeah, I'll do it real quick. So, cherubs are super weird, obviously, and why do they exist in art? It's like they're painted on the walls of the Sistine Chapel, Renaissance art. It's very strange. And I remember when I was a child thinking, like, this is so weird. I don't want to be associated with this. And then,
These chubby, naked babies.
yeah, like, why are adults interested in this image? Like,
Yeah.
this isn't, because it's, as a child, it's not what I was striving for, right? So I was like, this is so...
I think it's like showing like innocence. Because like, you know, like become ye as little children, and also like naked adults. Just we don't really want like naked. Well, at some point they progressed to having naked adults on Sistine Chapel, but mostly it was like babies are just kind of like the innocuous vibes, maybe. I feel like I'm really uneducated about this.
Well, I just saw a painting of a particularly lovely cherub yesterday, and I like suddenly understood, and I think it's just because of like the age I am at,
You
where
understood on an
suddenly,
emotional level.
yeah, like suddenly children aren't like, well, this sounds terrible, but like they're not children as characters, but children as like animating vibes around a scene that are just like the essence of playfulness itself.
Yeah.
And like the like still like the, you know, adult characters depicted in any like biblical scene like that are like the center of the thing, but the images of like cute children make the thing like sweet and good.
Yeah.
And so they're just like but what I was literally experiencing when I saw it was just like this part of myself that just melted and was like, oh, this is like happiness. And so I really think like Michelangelo, or I don't think it was actually Michelangelo that was painting cherubs, but whoever was painting cherubs, like recognized this like basic thing in women of just like, they fucking love babies. Like, women love babies. And it's like the directing force for some reason, some inexplicable reason. So that's what it's an image of.
I feel like when we were at the other day at Shayna's barbecue, and there was a bunch of little kids running around.
Yes, exactly.
I felt like, I was like, you know what, this is like next level cool.
Yes, like parties are better when there's kids running around.
You're just like running around underfoot and stuff,
Yes.
and like, I don't know, it's like that, it like, from a duality standpoint, like, polarizes, like, how, like, it makes, like, adults more integrated as adults.
Yes.
To not be like, we're grown up. You know what I mean? Like, kids, you. Like, it's like, no, we're all in, you know what I'm saying? You have, like, this transgenerational, like, little stack of, like, little humans.
Yeah, like, there's both, like, okay, we gotta, like, handle the kids, and then sometimes the kids are like directing us, and then you get to like, the interplay. It's like so fun.
Kids,
Kids, yes. Anyway, cherubs, that's the reason.
Well, and they're angels in these paintings. They're divine. They're from God, and that's...
They have 1,000 faces.
It's as simple as that a woman feels her connection to divine creativity.
Yeah.
Looking on a baby's face, you know, with their whole like body and spirit and mind, they understand that they have a finger on the pulse of divine creativity that men don't. And the cherub face is the symbol of that connection to the divine lineage.
Totally.
Of bringing more consciousness into existence.
Yeah, and that's so cool because it's not the like amazing like burning bush or like biblical angel. It's not this like intense psychedelic like hero's journey thing. It's just like this sweet little and that is enough. That's like an amazing thing.
We gotta. I'm gonna be interested to see how this audio comes out.
Yeah, you guys have to.
Just talk directly into the mic, Stuart.
All right.
And I haven't been doing that enough either myself.
Yeah, I've been like waving it around.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hold it away from you to talk.
Okay, so I have another prompt. This is my first prompt for the week. Can we have a more optimistic attitude to postmodernism?
Yeah, I love this one.
Because I feel like, like this is this flip side of that whole, like if you think of postmodernism comes packaged with a bunch of like nihilism and sort of there's like a thin soup sort of, it's not, doesn't sustain you, but comes with, but also every time I get into the right headspace where I feel like I really understand the truth of like where I'm at right now in my life, I just realize like I have so much freedom.
Yeah.
Like we have so much freedom, and there's something incredible about that. And like it's almost like a challenge to just like not be so depressed in the face of that, because I think sometimes if you might, there's no way of knowing that like if you were someone who was living in like let's say we were living in the least postmodern time ever, so like I don't know, maybe like the 1930s. What's like the least postmodern time in recent memory? Like the height of modernism, the height of like
50s.
The 50s. Yeah, the 50s. It's probably the least postmodern time.
No, like 1910.
1910.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Pre-World War I.
Yeah.
The last gasps of like
The gold standard.
Yeah.
Yeah, the gold standard.
Late
and,
1800s, the era of the train.
the Edwardian
Yeah.
kind of like
exactly.
before the medieval world had been destroyed, but when
Yeah.
it was still being like hypercharged by industrialism.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. I wish I knew more about that era, to be honest.
The golden age.
When was the Great Gatsby? Was like 20s, right?
Yeah,
that's right.
that's like, the war hasn't happened yet, but we're like marching toward postmodernism now.
Yeah. But anyway, if we were living in such a time, we might think that like feel similarly constrained by like, we might feel like we didn't, like things were bad for other reasons or something. But so maybe like the challenge is just to not look at things that way and realize that freedom is kind of this incompressible fluid that like the human soul is an incompressible fluid where you can squeeze it, but it's always going to pop out in different places.
Yeah.
And don't convince yourself that somehow you've managed to, it's been squished and it's hopeless now, because I don't think it is.
Well, I sent that video of biblically accurate angels and what they look like, and I think those images are a symbolic representation of the emotional density and the subjective weight that's pressing on you. Mm-hmm. If you are in the presence of such a multidimensional, like hyper being, you would feel this intense assault on your will, an intense acceleration maybe, as your consciousness was trying to keep up with what it was perceiving. Mm-hmm. And so the intense amount of freedom we have in a postmodern age, that intense freedom is that pressure of like being face to face with a angel or face to face with a god. It's the pressure of what will you do with your life? No one's going to tell you. You can do just about anything with it. And that's like fight or flight paralysis for a while, sometimes for people's entire lives. So it's postmodernism by virtue of God being dead, but he's like, along the lines of what I just said, you could say that God is more present and pressing on your free will than ever before, just because we are in a more capitalist society and have more freedom, and that's much more challenging.
Gearing up.
So I think there might be this there's I'm kind of thinking about this as like crystallized versus liquid freedom, because like there's these different, because like I think the European idea of freedom, if most Europeans will say something along the lines of like I've heard that, like there's this way, the difference between the way Americans versus Europeans view freedom is that Americans are usually view freedom as like a freedom from kind of thing, and then Europeans view freedom as a freedom to kind of thing, where they're like, if an American might say to like someone living in Germany, like, like, isn't that weird that you like can't name your kid Adolf or something, and then like that's like a violation of free speech or something, and then German might say like, well, isn't it weird that you don't have like a guaranteed 8 weeks of vacation a year by your government? And Americans will say like, no, that's not weird at all, because who's the government to say like how much vacation you have? So there's this different side of the coin kind of. I think Europe has this more like almost like they're like the OG Great Society culture, where they're thinking of like freedom as mainly being the opposite of being in poverty. Freedom is affluence. Freedom is like a kind of societal program, whereas Americans think of freedom as being the absence of a societal program. And I think that kind of maps onto this idea of crystallized versus liquid freedom, where like it is true, if you did create a society that was the most harmonious, beautiful thing, that does free you from having to you can be mediocre, and then you're carried along in this beautiful current of the milieu that you're in, and that's why like people think that like the French or whatever have like kind of a lazy vibe about them, or just Southern Europeans in general.
So you're like freed from personal responsibility.
A little bit.
The pressure of that.
A little bit,
okay.
But there is like, it's not like it's entirely inauthentic. There is a self-awareness, at least among Southern Europeans, that like, it's like, we're lazy, but we have culture. So it's fine. We can afford to be lazy because we're so rich in this current of history, and we just get up and you're just like, oh yes, this is life.
Like believe in the beauty of the experience, and they don't need to explain it.
And that's what we're missing as Americans. But what they're missing is this like more like raw animal sense of like, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah,
purpose. That's what Americans have. It's like this more like wide-eyed kind of like jungle view of freedom. So like, we're just living. I think America is really one of the most postmodern countries, and California is definitely one of the most postmodern states, because we're just like the sloshing, liquid freedom juice that's kind of like in we're little puddle. It's just raining from the sky. It's all over us all the time. So we're like get so sick of that. And that's what, like, the kind of ironic postmodern nihilistic thing is like, this is all I've ever known, and like, it's like you just forgot that you could actually do something with this if you like,
That's like every young man I know is like, and probably every young woman too, but I really like hear it from young men, like, is that this freedom, this like intense amount of freedom is like the most debilitating force in their lives, and like the scariest thing to be dealing with, and they want less of it.
Yeah, I was just talking to a guy who just got free of like hard drug addiction, and what he said was that the thing that terrifies him most is now he has the freedom to do anything,
right?
Because he's not addicted anymore.
Right.
And I was like, kind of bowled over by that. I was like,
yeah.
So you're like I've never been on the trip of being, like on doing like opiates or something and got out of that. So I don't have that contrast. I've just
Right.
kind of like backed into, like emerged into this feeling of, it's been a more gradual transition into the feeling like, I guess I've had longer to realize that I can do whatever I want. But
Yeah.
having that hit you, I can see how that would be terrifying, because it's like you're deprived of the devil you know.
I think that's a propaganda distortion. The European freedom from privation. The only thing that gives you enough affluence to have freedom from adverse conditions is pioneers doing the hard work with their freedom to experience reality in raw terms. And with people, freedom from responsibility, that's not freedom, that's slave mentality. That's how you become a slave. And the young men who want freedom from their realization of freedom really just want to be fucking slaves. They wish this responsibility was taken away from them.
I think maybe this is one of those cases where the word freedom is referring to, it's one of those linguistic inflation things, like what do we really mean when we say that? Because freedom is kind of used to mean both of those things, but I think that there is something obviously to the European way of looking at the harmonious society, but you might need a different word than freedom, or you might have to like come to terms about what it is that you're saying, because maybe in the extreme, I think the kind of like ugly kind of American freedom that gets parodied mainly by Europeans is like, like the French, like 200, you could like have 200 years of society and like you wouldn't develop a culture. You would just it's almost like, yeah, you have all this freedom, but you choose to use it to like just construct shopping malls everywhere and, to satisfy your base desires, which of course is like the East, communist propaganda line that explains why capitalism is bad, because it's like, it's going to somehow, given the mass, it's like a sort of not having faith in the human spirit, that if you give the masses what they want, they'll just spend all their time and money on Netflix and junk food, which is kind of true, but also not. So it's just I think it's ultimately a question of like, both of those things are kind of distortions. The real question is, do you accept the bad with the good in either of those cases? When it's liquid freedom or it's crystallized freedom, like, do we accept? So we probably as Americans, we have to accept the bad with the good because we don't have a choice. And if you're in the more crystallized great society, the analogous flip side, inverse mirror image question would be like, so this society, this pharaoh who mobilized millions of people to build this monument, probably wasn't super great for those people. But look at this amazing monument. It's lasted 5,000 years. So that's like the beauty that's lasted. It's the,
Yeah, so like in societies like that, there's not freedom, but there's one person holding the meaning and directing everybody. And then
it's sublimated freedom.
Yeah. And then in our situation, it's total freedom, but people aren't doing the work of like being their own meaning holders. So that's creating nihilism baby rather than like individual meaning baby, which is that like the way to think of postmodernism as a good thing is like, whoa, look, all of life is a stage, and I'm not just one of the players, like I'm writing it and I get to decide. And
well, it's not just, that's not even true. That Egypt has built the pyramids and stuff, and Europe has a lot of culture or something. But Elon Musk is taking us to Mars, and that puts to bed any comparison between American freedom, which is real, and laziness, which is just looking at what other people have done and pretending you're European, and so you can be proud of that and just sit on your laurels. But really, your entire livelihood depends on people aggressively using their freedoms to face the jungle, basically.
I have a poem part of a poem that I want to read in reference to this idea of like confronting the huge amount of freedom as like a terrifying biblical angel.
Yeah.
So this is Rilke. It's the first Duino elegy. Who, if I cried out, would hear me among the angels' orders? And even if one of them pressed me suddenly to his heart, I'd be consumed in his more potent being. For beauty is nothing but the beginning of terror, which we can still barely endure. And while we stand in wonder, it coolly disdains to destroy us. See, every angel is terrifying.
Whose poem is that?
It's Rilke, the German poet Rilke. It's like mystic, somewhere between romantic and modern.
Yeah, I remember the first time I heard that quote, that every angel is terrifying, was Terence McKenna.
Oh.
In his prologue to Archaic Revival. And I think in America or in any semi-free or free country, the angels are loose in the wilderness.
Yeah.
Terrifying the populace.
Yeah.
And only the very brave or people with a chip on their shoulder are able to like grasp the opportunity that's presented there and make shit happen with that.
I think this reminds me of this other thought I had about how, like, I think remember that one pod we talked about how we were talking about like apologies, how like an apology, a genuine apology, is like a kind of like a human virtue, and that's what makes it gives it power. It's like this source of power. So it ends up becoming sort of wrapped by a social construction at best, and like a oppressive institution at worst. But institutions, at the core of every institution is a little bit of humanity, because that's the thing that it sort of builds itself around, like an energy source. Like, you don't find planets with life in the middle of deep space, you find them around stars, because they're leeching off the warmth, that's being generated at the core of that star. I think something like that is, an angel is like an idea of just raw anima or something, maybe.
Animation, yeah.
And in older societies, those angels have been put into temples.
You gotta talk like
right into it.
Like, be pointing it at you.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think that it's good to have them in temples, and like, it's not always a bad thing. I think like you still have to have a stage for all this freedom, because I don't know how much. I think freedom would be worth less if the entire world was like Jack in the Boxes and truck stops. And I'm not saying that's what America would do if left to its own devices, but we are inheriting an incredible amount of beauty that comes from like pre-modern, distinctly crystallized societies, and it's great that we have those building blocks. So I think I think of it as ecological progression, really. That like you need you need like this more solid structures to provide a stage on which this liquid version of freedom is valuable. And I think I adopt this perspective just because of this whole idea that the truth is usually an integration of two polar ways of looking at things. And I do wonder what the culture on Mars is going to look like. I do wonder if there's going to be some sci-fi bullshit. I think that'd be too predictable. I really hope it's not. I hope it's like not what you expect. If it looks like spaceships, it's going to be disappointing. That would be a failure. If Mars looks like more like Europe, that'd be awesome, I think. Because it'd be like a nice like icing on the on the Enterprise. It would like humanize it in some way because
Yeah. So, okay, that's reminding me of Joan Didion has this essay, Self-Respect, Its Source, Its Power, and there's this part where she talks about like how very like traditional human disciplines and etiquettes of the old world make the like conquistadors' journeys into the new world possible and meaningful. And so it's like the flickering of candle light and the sound of using fine china in the jungle is like, it's the combination of those things that makes that experience. So it's not that I think that Mars will literally have like Venetian buildings, but I'm imagining that like it would become incredibly important to them to have like little espresso cups there.
Yeah,
because it's
absolutely.
the sensation of like
Yeah.
some old human thing
Yeah.
that matters so much for some reason. It's like,
yeah. You know there's going to be some hardcore Earth nostalgia
Yeah.
out in space. And that's going to make space more beautiful because it like highlights the fact that you're there.
But once we're there, the question is if the natives of Earth will become lazy Europeans doing nothing to refresh their own culture, just acting like the established
really hard on
structures.
Europeans. Keep going.
Well, it's terrible what they're letting happen. They're rotting away. They're letting the ocean swallow them
Yeah.
with negligence and laziness. They're doing nothing to refresh the meaning of themselves. They're dying out. And it's a tragedy because it's where we come from as Americans.
Yeah.
So yeah, once things are thriving on Mars, the new challenge for Earth natives will be to see through the illusion that the real shit is happening on Mars and we're just the past now.
Right.
That'll have to be seen as a new opportunity at that point, a new Earth that now, I don't know. Have you read that book?
No.
I read that book.
I'm assuming you had.
It's hippie as fuck, for sure, yeah. But I'm petering out. I wonder what the next prompt should be.
Stuart was trying to say animation and said anima, and then I thought we should do that idea.
Anima, animus.
Yeah. Did you
Yeah, I
show
said
that in the
anima,
thread?
and I realized that's just the feminine aspect, right?
Yeah.
The animus, yeah.
So, yeah, I've been going through a lot in my personal life, and Alex was like, okay, here's a psychology idea, like, think about your animus, develop the animus, and think about it in really, like, literal and specific terms, like, who is he? What is he doing in your life? If he's the man that's always with you, like, how are you interacting right now? And it's like imaginary friend game or something. But it's been really interesting because I realized some like basically like femininity or woman hating things that I had going in my mind from like childhood, and got to then kind of rewrite that story and relationships. So like, but it's a really fun game to play, and I wanted to ask you about your anima.
I want to play this game.
Okay, so you can imagine like what your anima looks like, what kind of job she has, like.
Oh,
some
interesting.
kind of-
Really concrete.
Yeah, like really concrete, or
Like an alternate
just-
reality. Like
yeah.
who's my twin anima in the
Yeah.
multiverse?
and like
You might think about this for a second.
Yeah, by default, you project your anima into your relationships. So prior to ever thinking about it, it's Alicia.
yeah,
But when Alicia isn't around, you psychologically make a feminine projection of Stuart that is kind of the collection of all feminine memories and associations. It's like your mom and your sister and your grandma and Alicia and your own like multiverse like intuitions of other places and times where you're a girl. But then when Alicia's around, like all that gets like sublimated into just like whatever Alicia is doing and how you're interpreting that.
You're going to hate this, Alex, but my anima, I think, comes from my European self. That's where it found its expression. And I
love this, actually.
Okay.
Well, it makes sense.
I think that was my anima was, well, so from when I was a kid, my anima was pretty undeveloped because of my family dynamics. And because I think both my, my mom actually has a really strongly expressed animus, and so does my dad, actually. So I was raised in a pretty kind of like, animus heavy situation. But and I don't know, Europe definitely kind of like gave me this, I think it was just a reaction. It created an opening just in general because of culture shock and stuff that just created an opening, and then probably the least expressed things had the highest pressure to start expressing themselves in the empty space that was created because they were like really needed to be expressed. This, I don't know, maybe an aspect of my anima is kind of the way I walk lightly, kind of. I learned to do that in Europe somehow, whereas this kind of like light-footedness, maybe, which is really something that I associate with the feeling of living there, where people take up a little bit less. There's not as much physical posturing of like people's movements is a little different. People's like volume levels too is a little different. Like Stockholm Airport versus Newark Airport is a different world. When you step off the plane, you're like Stockholm Airport's like, why is it so quiet here?
Yeah.
And why are there real dishes at the airport cafe? Newark's like, you want a Philly cheesesteak? Like, the machines are like, you're gonna have to order from the iPad. It's on the table. And you're like, ugh. So like, my anima is like, sort of like thinks of itself as like this like shrinking away from like that like boisterous like beast mode of living. But then, you come back and you're like, I'm back, baby. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I almost got ran over by the luggage cart. Woo, America. So like, there's something great about that too. So the two like,
Wow.
So I don't know. I'm confused with this question because this animus thing, to me, it's too tied up in this, it's too mapped onto the whole like Atlantic sides of the Atlantic thing. So I don't know if I can really answer this question in pure terms.
Yeah, that's cool that you make that connection, though.
That was really good.
Yeah. I was thinking, like, European men just kind of sitting at a cafe and that being totally enough is like, they have the foundation of all of their cultural history behind them. They know, like, maybe their families, like, lived in this village for years, or there's like the history is there, like the beautiful buildings are there, and then they just get to sit in perhaps like a very feminine state of just like enjoyment of everything that's been made for them, and like they don't have to explain it, they don't need to, because everything's already beautiful. Like Paris, I was thinking, like, I've always wanted to go to Paris, maybe live in Paris, and now I'm thinking, like, I think if I went there, like, I wouldn't get anything done because I'd just be so satisfied.
Your animus would go stir crazy.
Yeah. And my anima would be like, don't worry. This is great.
I guess my anima lately has been about this intense mother focus, like intense love, directed like a Sauron eye beam onto the present moment and the present experience. And yeah, nurturing, affirming, like discovery of what the moment is doing next, and seeking a way, the lover archetype of warrior, magician, lover, some other thing. Yeah, king. That most important one. The lover part of it, of seeking to just celebrate the raw sensations of things, and where seeking to support the male half of the experience, which is much more beastly and automatic and reactionary, and just like a bull just charging forward into the next thing.
So you guys had an episode on like warrior, lover, magician, king, and there's like a woman student of Carl Jung who created a similar structure for the female psyche, and hers, instead of queen, she puts mother, lover, medial woman.
Medial woman?
Yeah, which is like high priestess or like
Oh, that's
medium.
the magician.
Okay.
Yeah, magician. And then warrior, Amazon. And the lover aspect, there's a specific word that's kind of like a courtesan. That's like, I thought intellect would be in the magician kind of sphere, but she's putting it in the like lover courtesan sphere, where it's like, this is where friendship exists, this is where imagination exists, this is where like emotion, and it's like the world of the interior, an interior relationship. And then the mother is exterior, an exterior relationship. So the mother like tends the house, tends the garden. She makes sure things are physically running smoothly. And the lover like is in touch with the emotions and like her own inner world and the inner world of the other. And then medial and Amazon is really directed towards specific ends of her own. That tends to be more exterior too. The medial, or more physical and like more metaphysical, is the magician. But for mother and magician, it's more about collective experience. Like the mother is tending to the entire household. And then the medial magician figure is in touch with like the metaphysical experience of a collective and understands larger archetypes as a whole. Anyway, I'm losing you guys.
No, I'm just trying to think about the parallels between that and, because you said she was a student of Carl Jung, so this is the Anima version of the
for the map of the feminine psyche.
So what are the distinctions, like what are the contrasts between the way the animus is mapped?
Well, like the thing that I found really notable was that instead of having queen, she puts mother, and the effect that had on me was turning it into like, these are all like on equal footing, and like it's a wheel instead of like this one thing is at the center. And
oh yeah,
that just changed my sense about it, because I feel like I haven't actually read this in Carl Jung, but I've heard you talk about like the king is at the center, and then all these other forces move around him. But
yeah, I think the king in a more fundamental way is actually, like, I always think of the king as kind of being the synthesis of the other elements.
Yeah.
That is not necessarily, like, it might incidentally be the center or the top, but it's kind of the synthesis of the elements. And this is like super cheesy, but I always think about Aragorn. Like, he's like a warrior king, obviously, but he's also like really tender and like loving, and like that makes all the other aspects more So that character is great.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it is very masculine, that mapping of those things. It almost seems like the Amazon is almost I'm not sure what she means by that exactly.
It functions as like, anything you do in the physical world that's very directed. So this is like girl boss.
Yeah,
like,
right.
This is executive function, like working on any kind of business project, physical efforts.
Like literally the jungle, navigating the jungle.
Yeah.
Right. Using your wits. This kind of. Yeah.
Using like effortful force.
Yeah.
Toward a specific end.
And then the magician versus the medial character is, what's the difference between the anima animus of that one?
I don't totally understand that. I think in my mind, like in my imagination, the medial woman might be almost more like an oracle who's like just speaking like the truth of the collective, and it's almost like she's like a disembodied, like her personality isn't so present and she's just in touch with like the huge collective experience, but maybe that's like an undeveloped medial woman, but
right.
I think of the magician as being like, okay, I want this thing, like let me create the magic spell or potion to
like
make that happen.
Like a technologist kind of, as opposed to like a sage or a muse or this conduit. Yeah.
But that's not from my reading, I just imagined that.
Of course. Right.
Well, the technologist would be the warrior with the magician in alliance. I've always thought of the magician basically the way she just described the medial, of seeing through to the patterns, seeing through to the source code of things. And it's not personal, it's just this piercing through the veil and seeing the way things are going. And then to like more masculine type, like do something with that, or make a gesture that shifts a tide in a certain direction, is just an impulse of the warrior based on the information that the magician presented.
And that's like mythically, or in like a literary sense, that's true, because there's always the magician in his like hut in the forest or his tower or whatever, and he's just like happy to be there forever, like looking into crystals and reading books until some like young hero or warrior or king comes and tells him like, okay, we need you now to be directed towards something. Yeah.
And then you hope the lover sneaks in somewhere too. So that the world doesn't get destroyed.
So, which of those four comes out the most at a party?
Oh, the lover, of course, person. Right? Or the Amazon, I guess, if you're dancing. No, lover.
For you, I think it's the love. Well, I'd have to rethink of what, not the king then, but the mother is for you. I'm still like processing.
Yeah, I think in a salon setting, I'm manifesting
at a salon,
the mother. I'm really like, the thing about the salon is it's like this crazy dance for me of trying to do like interior world connection with people, and then trying to do like the mother of like creating physical. Yeah. Which is,
well, that's why you have me there, to shore up the weak connections.
Yeah, it's helpful.
Yeah, there's a lot of lover energy for you at a party, but then there's a warrior ability that is able to step in at a given moment if like things suck.
Yeah, command. Now we go here.
Yes, yeah. But Jade, what comes out the most for Stuart at parties?
Let's see.
I'm glad you're asking her, because I wouldn't know how to answer this question.
I know.
Stuart like begins a party with like, I don't know, he shows up with a thing, like he's done the father work beforehand of like making some really lovely dish, or like he's done some like creation of the space or creation of the physical.
Yeah. Help me feel more confident when I arrive. If I'm like holding like a jar of tea or something like that. I have a reason to be here.
And then,
Let me pass.
yeah.
Excuse me.
But then, like, Stuart's like the most maybe in touch with like interior conversation. Like he's one of the best people to talk to at a party for me, because I'm like, oh yeah, like we can really like talk about some specific thing instead of kind of just standing in observation of the event. Like, yeah.
Yeah, that's where I.
So that's
where I feel most
lover
comfortable.
archetype, I guess.
Definitely, finding a little corner with someone and talking about something that like makes you feel like it's like a place to live at the party, sort
Yeah.
of. So
You set up your like camp.
yeah, kind of bounce from person to person. Yeah, I definitely feel deprived at parties where I feel like it's like I either want to be in this little intimate conversation or just dancing, not talking to people.
Yeah.
Those are the two modes I'm comfortable with.
Yeah.
I feel pretty uncomfortable most of the time when I'm like, trying to like just general vibes, right? Like, yeah. Looking at everything. I can't look at like 10 people. I can't. It's too much. I can only handle like a couple. 2 or 3 people is like a great conversational. Like even this having 3 people right now
I know.
is like different.
Yeah.
But 3 is a great number. Maybe even the best. But 4, ooh no. Because then it's not like. Because then you just feel like you're getting like either ganged up on or you're trying to like steal the spotlight or something like that. I don't know. It's just this weird kind of thing. But
Yeah,
But yeah.
well, that's making me think like the more individual parts of this wheel that we're looking at, we seem to have like pretty well in hand, and it's the collective aspects that we're trying to
interesting.
navigate more. Whereas like I definitely can think of people in my life that are like totally doing the collective part really, really well, but then it's harder to get more into like a one-on-one conversation with them, something like that.
Yeah. But if you do, sometimes it can be really rewarding.
Yeah.
If you can get behind, yeah, because like, it's weird how some people are literally actually afraid of that personal conversation, whereas some other people are like afraid of the opposite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, do me.
Do you?
Okay.
I think the most experience Stuart has with me at a party is a birthday party of his. With like only like 5 people.
Oh, yeah.
And you got gifted The Gay Science by Nietzsche.
Oh, yeah.
And a nice shirt.
That's right.
And I was meeting Dallas for the first time.
Dallas.
And then Jade has a very specific experience of me at parties that I don't think is representative, but apparently there's probably a grain of truth to it too.
Which is that every time I will see Alex at a party, I'll walk up to him with like, great enthusiasm, like, oh, it's one of my best friends. Like, we work together once a week, and it's Alex. And I'll be like, hey. And he'll be like, very withdrawn, like awkward, and like as if I'm like a little sister being like so excited. And he's like, oh, not so much. And then you've said that like that's you're just being the force of like you're like being the container and holder of like the general awkwardness that like no one else is willing to admit to.
Interesting. Yeah, the lightning rod kind of thing. Yeah.
And so thinking about which aspect of that wheel you're being at a party, I'm now thinking like you're doing like magician a lot, because you're like really like sensing all the different vibes, and you're in touch with like I can think of a particular party where there was like the wrong book on this certain display, and you had to correct it, because
Yeah.
That is true. I feel like Alex you are someone who if I feel confident, I could sort of like prompt, I could share the most esoteric thought I was perceiving, and you'd be like, yeah, I knew that like 5 minutes ago. And I'd be like, instead of being like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah.
So like, yeah, that is the magician energy for sure. Is kind of just being aware of like the hidden landscape of things, and like sort of like preemptively sort of like navigating around it. Yeah.
What I'm trying to do at a party, like What the magician is there to just see what the fuck is happening and where it's all heading.
Yeah.
So that the warrior can maybe make some crucial adjustments so that the lover can finally have a good fucking time.
Oh, this is who it's all about. Huh?
That's
Yeah,
what it's
true.
all about.
I do feel like it's almost like there's like a ranking, almost like suits of cards or something, where like the lover is, well, hearts. He's the third highest. Kings, spade is kings. This actually, wow, they already figured this out. So then the diamonds and clubs, clubs is warrior, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Diamonds. Okay, so warrior breaks open the space. Diamonds, magicians, they're the one, they kind of decorate it, make it worth living in. The lover enjoys it, and then the king takes the credit.
Well, the thing I'm thinking of now is like, are you working backwards? Because I think most heroes' journeys begin with lover, and lover must become warrior because he's like lost his love or something. So he has now this mission that he has to complete, and then he has to like get the magician on his side. So now you've got warrior and magician together.
Yeah. What's
and
that
it's king at
famous
the
movie
end.
about that? The that's like made like in the. God, I can't believe I don't remember this. Literally that thing where it's like a farm boy, and then he like, it's like the super cheesy.
Oh yeah, Princess Bride.
Princess Bride. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
classically.
That is like that to a T. Super corny and hero's journey. Yeah. Somebody said that Alicia told me that I like was like that farm boy, and I'm like, I don't know, man. I watched first. I was like, oh yeah, saving the princess. But then I watched that movie, and I was like,
yeah, the farm boy
was
part
like,
is not his
oh.
most flattering hour.
this is corny as hell. Like, I kind of really liked the Spanish dude he was sword
Yeah.
fighting with. Like, I just, the way that they like have that super polite, respectful fight is like, I love that so much.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful. They're like, I have the most respect for you. Like,
Yes.
I'm just on a mission. Like,
Yeah.
well, I have to do this to avenge my
Yeah.
father. It's like, oh, like,
Yeah.
and they're just like fighting, and they're like,
Yeah.
I love that so much because it's like this, it's like all the glory of the warrior without any of like the bruteness to him.
Yeah.
It's like the most redeemed warrior you could be.
Yeah.
Super polite, gentleman warrior.
That scene is like a throwback to this era of filmmaking where they became really obsessed with like the choreography of sword fights. And then so much of movies just became like choreographed sword fights being really cool.
Yeah.
And then I think like the end result of that is now these horrible Marvel movies that are just like, and you like can't even keep track because it's just like super fast moving, swishing, and it's, yeah.
Well, the best parties that I experience are when I've just already done all that work and the lover is safe and at play
Yeah.
and just makes his way to the party at his leisure.
Yeah.
But so often, because of my work schedule right now,
Oh, yeah.
to even like get there
Yeah.
takes this immense amount of fucking work and preparation
Totally.
and responsibility
Yeah.
and keeping an eye on the Cinderella, like
Yeah.
when the clock ticks 12, I'm going to turn
Totally.
into a pumpkin. But just at a normal, like the best parties, I already know they're amazing like a month before they happen.
Yeah, true.
And it's lining up on the right day of the week for me to actually indulge myself. And like every single person I run into is like a really enriching moment. And the magician only comes into my mental universe just to like amuse the lover
Yeah.
with insights about philosophy and stuff. and the warrior will act to like you said, occasionally put words to the awkwardness that no one will talk about. Just purely to amuse myself, I'll point out elephants in the room out loud and watch how people react.
Are we going to do Jade now?
Oh.
Who's Jade's expressed archetypes? Because we've done me and then we did you.
Do you want to start?
Oh my.
Just mainly the lover, I think.
Yeah.
and leaping. Like this happy gazelle leaping from thing to thing to thing.
It's true.
But you do it a lot the same way as... You do it the same fucking order as me, though, just all before you show up to the party.
It's true.
You've done all this magician work
It's
to
true.
understand what
The
society...
archetypal significance of the social event.
Yes, to understand what society itself is doing at its root that month of that year.
Yeah.
And so then the warrior lady comes in to like make the props and make the dress
Yeah.
for it.
So
and
true.
everything.
What dress is necessary for the zeitgeist?
It's not pretty. It's necessary. She puts on her earrings.
The beauty of necessity.
Interesting. Yeah, I remember that party at it was like 2020 New Year's party.
Oh, that was awesome.
That was the most. I remember you.
Oh, at your old house?
Yeah,
Yeah,
the Alice party.
Yeah, and I remember it was the Alice in Wonderland thing. Yeah, that was. I think that really, the lover thing really came out when we were all dancing, and like
yeah.
it was. I felt like a warm shower to me that night.
Me too.
It was like
Me too.
that was the most emotionally deprived I've been in a long time, and like that was like you finally get into like the warm water, and it was super nice. So.
Yeah.
I remember seeing, like, I was having an amazing time, but I saw grown men on the dance floor
Yes.
part of the house, just like with their
Yes.
arms open, spinning at
Yes.
the ceiling,
Yeah.
just smiling at existence.
Yeah.
Like there might have been like only like 5 people on the dance floor,
There was this
but
guy
like, grown men were just surrendered to how good it felt to be
Yeah.
around other people.
like I remember a particularly tall, huge guy. I don't know who he was, but he was like vibing. And I remember at one point me and Samaria like flitting about that scene. This 3 forces kind of just like, yes, this is happiness.
Yeah, there was like some forest fairy kind of like energy in that whole room.
Yeah.
Remember?
Yeah, we cultivated that pretty hard.
Yeah. Yeah, well, something about like, I mean, the cherubs they're definitely flitting about. Maybe that's what it is. They're like, it's like a way of, it's a little baby or of this very like soft, beautiful creature that is kind of embodying. It's like conspicuously being present there because, and it's like kind of showing how much just baked in freedom there is in this whole space, because otherwise, like, you know, there's this thing with like monkeys, different kinds of monkeys, depending on the environment that the monkeys evolve in, they're like either nice monkeys or mean monkeys, and it's just a function of scarcity. Like baboons are assholes because they live in like a pretty dry, scarce desert thing, and they'll just like kill each other and like eat each other's face off, and like that's not great, baboons. Like we understand you got to do what you got to do. You got to survive. That's why you've selected for like these fangs and this big ass forehead, and this, you know, I mean, like, okay, they're kind of like mean, cool looking monkeys, but they're not like the kind of monkey you'd really want to like have as a friend, or like. They're like, they would kill you probably, but then like on the other hand, there's like the abundant jungle monkeys that are just like, I'm going to recline on a bed of leaves and munch on a mango. Like, good monkey, like, yes, Jane Goodall, be friends with those monkeys so you don't get eaten. Okay, so those are Jane Goodall's favorite monkeys, and so yeah, you know, and so I think in some way that's kind of what it's like showing, is if you have these beautiful soft, you know, like beautiful babies or beautiful women or like beautiful men or like even like the European gentleman like sitting in the midst of like all this kind of like enfranchisement sort of, that's like an abundant environment emotionally and culturally, and so you don't need to like brace yourself. You can afford to like flit about or you know, or like sit like this or something, you know what I mean? Just kind of be like like not be like posturing, whereas like if you're like at the I don't know I can't think of a good like opposite example of that, but just a place where you feel like you have to like almost like brace yourself and be the one who bears all of the weight of everything. Like there's beauty in both of those things, and and a party, I guess the best party is that atmosphere that is like created by individuals who are kind of bringing all that energy and voluntarily spreading it out for a second and letting everyone sort of partake in this soup of, because like the individual is sort of like the crucible that cultivates that beauty, but then the beauty is wasted if it's not put into the world. What even like in the Bible, it's like, what is like the purpose of a lamp is not to be is to be on a shelf, not to be, this is like some Jesus stuff, but like the idea that you don't take a lamp and put it under a cup, you know what I mean? You let it shine its light into the world. I think that's actually a pretty profound idea that usually that's at least in my childhood, was completely glossed over because people took that to mean it was like the way it was like preached at you about, it was like that's like spreading the gospel, like somehow like that you're gonna like, and it's like, nah, I think you're missing the point, because the point is not to preach at people, it's like to be your best self, it's to kind of shine and show. A lamp isn't like
effortfully like directing its like energy like a flame throwing torch or
no, exactly.
something.
And
it's like,
and the Greeks had this idea that like the eyes were the lamp of the body, and this was a pre-modern idea that like actually the idea that light was coming from the sun and was reflecting off stuff and going to your eyes was not the general understanding of, that was not the metaphor they used to understand sight. People believed that the world was dark. This is what the Greeks believed, and that's what like people in the Middle East inherited for thousands of years. They believed that light was actually coming from the eyes, and that's how anything got illuminated. And so, on scientific, unlike on a physical level, like no, that's not true. But on a metaphorical level, it actually kind of is a lot. On a psychological level, it's closer to the truth because you are illuminating the world with your vision, and this is
with your like individual vision.
Yeah, and so that's why people who are like want to be seen. By, and they have to have, the only kind of light that can illuminate a person is the light that comes from another person's eyes. And so it's like, okay, so the Greeks, they were actually really onto something, that something about the witness is an illuminating beacon that sort of like bears who someone is. You can't be who you are in isolation without being seen by other people. So that a party is kind of like that sort of, it's an institution that's centered around that idea of bringing to the table what it is that you have.
So like, you're not like, if you're showing up to a party like posturing super hard, like ready to fucking fight, or like trying to show off, man. That's so not fun to be around.
Exactly.
But so there is like this like relaxing that must happen for it to be enjoyable. But I love that idea of the eyes as like the thing that's illuminating. I was watching Cave of Forgotten Dreams, which is a Werner Herzog. Yeah, love that movie. And they get into the topic of Venus of Willendorf and like images of fertility goddesses in like Paleolithic. Is that Paleolithic? And the images of these, like, they don't have heads. It's like just body, and it's huge body.
Hips.
And and like, I got really into the idea of like, it's pre-purpose, it's like directed human force towards something. It's Cave of Forgotten Dreams, like literally the era of like woman just like dreaming humanity into being, and that's what they worshipped before they had like something to do with the fact that now humanity does exist.
Yeah, I bet dreams would probably be the very first thing anyone ever talked about in the human civilization.
Like, what the fuck?
It's a shared set of experiences. Like, that's pretty crazy. Like, what is the first conversation that had ever occurred, and what was it about?
It was probably something like, why did you turn into a spider and lay eggs in my back, Roger? And Roger's like, I promise you, by all the hunts we've gone on together, I did not turn into a spider and lay eggs in you. Then they have to go on a Nancy Drew type story to try and solve the mystery, and thus are dreams discovered. Like, oh, that happened when your eyes were closed.
Yeah.
And you were like breathing super slow.
Cool.
As a side comment, I just want to say I like how Nancy Drew is yellow and the Hardy Boys are blue. Because, like, girls, I feel like pink for girls is not the best. I think yellow is such a more representative color of femininity.
Why?
Because it's just, yellow is just, like, I don't know. I don't know how to describe this. It's just an emotional feeling to me that, like, pink is, like, sort of, I think of pink as being, like, a little too mixed up with, like, maybe, like, sex or, like, something like pink, the pink, red, purple, or pink and red are like romance, passion, sex.
Yeah.
Blue, I guess, is boys or something. Maybe I haven't really thought about it. But yellow is like the color of like a sun, a flower, a spring day, a kind of like health, vitality, beauty. Like yellow is like a great color.
Yeah.
So I think Nancy Drew knew what they were doing. Because it'd be weird to have pink books, right? Isn't that like a little too like on the nose?
I think that's the proof of your thesis there is imagine if the Nancy Drew books were all pink.
Yeah. You're like, oh, this is Barbie novels, great.
Yeah.
Like,
You wouldn't respect Nancy as much.
It's true. But I think there's also this thing that I was really obsessed with when I found out, which is like when babies are like, it's necessary for like a testosterone hormone to be released for a fetus to like grow male reproductive organs, but like no hormone has to be released for like a baby girl fetus to develop into like a little girl.
It's a default, right? That's why men have nipples.
Yeah, so like yellow is like neutral, just like good energy, but blue is already more toward a certain gender. And so before puberty happens, like girls haven't released any hormone. They're like more just basically like, okay, that's human, but it's not like the particular like genitals that it has don't mean anything yet. It's just like neutral because no hormone's been released. That's just like the neutral thing that happened. And that's making me think like, yeah, girls are like neutral until puberty.
Men are sort of like the modified version of a human, sort of like the extra. Yeah, I don't know enough about evolutionary biology to understand why that is, but it kind of makes sense. And it's really weird. I never questioned why men have nipples until I was like it was only a few years ago that it even occurred to me to wonder why that was.
That's so funny.
And I was like, that is really strange. And I actually had to Google it. And I guess it's because of that fetus thing. But like, I really wonder why that has not raised more questions about, you know what I mean? It seems like one of those things you just take for granted.
Like from here up, are we all basically the same?
As far as I know, I think, okay, maybe that's why babies is like, getting back to the cherub thing. Like babies are kind of just like, sort of, they're maybe like the most unifying human form because they're the most basic, they're sort of like the uncarved block of humans. And that's why babies are innocent, is because they haven't taken on the kind of like forms that people want to project a bunch of stuff onto. You can't, because babies are just kind of round and smooth and like...
Babies are eggs.
They're just, they're one step removed from eggs. They're much closer to an egg than they are to a person, and I don't know. We had the discussion the other day about like, do babies have souls or not?
Oh my God.
Depends what kind of Catholic you talk to. Some think they do, and I think there's arguments both ways, honestly. But yeah, baby's almost like sort of like a still open portal into the where like there could be a soul there. The soul's trying to come through it, but like it's not quite. It's just that portal doesn't turn into a little bubble until it takes a second to kind of like bloop. Like, yeah, you could say the birth is the moment where you leaves the mother's body, but that's just the moment we label it as. It's also
Yeah.
like birth is more of a undefined, spread out kind of like
Yeah.
sort of even into like being like, by the time you get to like a 3-year-old, okay,
Yeah.
you're starting to become a little human. But before that, you're just like a portal into a different dimension for a second.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
you're not an animal,
Well, it's
but
like
you're also not a human yet.
enough outside of the mother's body that she can physically put it down and walk over here,
Yeah.
but it's still so completely
Yes.
dependent on her that like
Yes.
is it its own entity yet?
Yeah.
It's not.
No, it's definitely part of the mother's body still
Yeah.
for a while. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's kind of actually really
beautiful.
amazing. It's beautiful, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm tired.
All right. I feel like that was a very wholesome note to end on.
Yeah.